Hello and welcome to Uncle Data. And this year I'm collaborating with PyCon Lithuania to bring you conversations with actually keynote speakers. So today I'm joined by my former colleague Aurimas Griciūnas, and we're going to talk about his path through engineering and leadership and how he approaches learning and sharing knowledge. I guess you've seen his posts on LinkedIn about MLOps, ML, and other now currently AI-related topics. So hello, Aurimas.
Hi, Thomas, and thank you for inviting me here. And I think we'll have a very nice conversation around everything that you just mentioned.
So, since we, kind of parted ways, through our, in previous place, so what you've been up to, what can you share, and how was your, career journey, after that?
After that, okay, so we were both working at Home2Go, right? And at that point in time, we were both leading also some functions in the data space in that specific company. And since I left, I actually left to embark on a short sabbatical of hands-on. And I did that for almost a year until the history kind of caught up with me. But for that year, so for 10 months, I was actually doing some hardcore MLOps engineering and building MLOps platform for data scientists to build their models on at one of the leading Netherlands, back then leading Netherlands startups, which was dealing with transaction data of the four biggest Netherlands banks. And we built a pretty nice AWS-based set of infrastructure for data scientists to fully automate their machine learning workflows, because we needed to work in a very restricted environment, very secure environment, where we were not able to actually even touch data in any way. We were not even allowed to copy paste a record from the screen. That was kind of prohibited out by some settings in AWS. Yeah.
There are those settings.
There are some AWS specific services that allow you to do that. So that was that. And after that, kind of, as mentioned, history caught up with me due to several things. So while at that company, I also started creating content, which you now see sometimes, you might see on LinkedIn and my newsletter. And since then, I was also invited to various podcasts as a speaker, and I had a chance to actually have a conversation with who is now my ex-boss in the previous company that I worked for, which is Neptune AI, and the company is building software as a service infrastructure for teams that are building their own foundation models. So if you kind of think of MLflow as a tool, so imagine scaling it out to hyperscale and making it compatible for teams that are actually building those models that have billions and sometimes trillions of parameters, right? Because that's a big load to observe as the models are being trained, and that's what Neptune did. And I jumped into a podcast with the founder of this company, and somehow we managed to keep the relationship after the podcast, and he invited me to interview for the company. I joined the company. Initially I was doing some solutions architecting. So I was telling our clients how to most efficiently implement infrastructure and MLOps practices in their day-to-day. But eventually, as mentioned, history caught up, and I was proposed to become a head of product and then eventually chief product officer. And I had chance to see how startups work from product's perspective. So defining the roadmaps, tracking all of the metrics, defining North Star metrics, dealing with growth, and making sure that customers that actually register, free customers that register to your product become paid customers, and similar things, right? It's everything that product does. And eventually I left to try some things on my own, and I'm still currently in, I would say, discovery mode, but we have some big plans for what we are planning to do in the upcoming months. So one of them is AI engineering bootcamp that we will be launching in 1 month, and this will be specifically tailored for end-to-end practice training. So as a professional who is either a data scientist or a machine learning engineer who wants to re-specialize into AI engineering, or a data engineer who hasn't been dealing with AI engineering that much, because of course data engineers can, because we have most of the skill set needed. We are planning to go end to end and train practitioners on how to define the problem, to figure out what problem is fit for AI, how to then create the metrics you need, and then hands-on build applications from the least complexity to the largest complexity. So from retrieval augmented generation systems to agentic RAG to eventually AI agents that actually automate some tasks autonomously. And we also wanted to have it kind of backed by implementation of best practices in LLMOps, so observability, evaluation, as well as deployment to cloud infrastructure, so that you can have your projects kind of in there and running and tested and continuously evolved, right? And we are planning to learn all of that, teach all of that to everyone who signs up. And the goal of this is also to make the learners build their own projects. They can also come up with their own ideas, and we'll have capstone projects where either you implement something that is general and proposed, or you have your own project and then you can do a demo to the cohort. And potentially, if you're doing really well, then we are also planning to do some promotion on social media so that you can maybe even get some funding day one to build your own startup. So this is one thing that I'm doing. Then we are also doing some content creation. So I'm doing some continue to do content creation, and that's that.
Okay.
Also, so I forgot to mention that I'm also a practitioner, hands-on practitioner as well, because I am contracting consulting companies on how to build these agentic systems, and I'm doing that also hands-on to keep my skills at the best level to actually teach them as well.
Yeah, I noticed that during our time, even at Home to Go, when we were working together, you're always hands-on and you're consuming, technical literature, like, people do cereal for breakfast. Like, right? You come up and like, I read this book, this does that, maybe we can apply that. So I guess it all makes sense, when you have so much knowledge actually accumulated through the years, why you actually can go on and like create the content out of it, plus, teach other people how to actually follow the best practices, because you just combine, the theoretical or like, what you learned into the practice, and you understand the concepts, and then you can actually, teach. And also what I liked about your bootcamp when you mentioned, is that people can actually do their own projects instead of generalized, because that will maybe make the knowledge stick better. Because of like, fun thing is that like in 2 of the podcasts I recorded up until now, so both people, use pandas as an example, and that their documentation is like, let's use these random numbers here. Let's do variance, more random numbers, right? And both of them outlined, that the data best, or like the context best, is actually the best fuel to to basically create things or learn things on your own, and to actually make it stick to you. So I guess that's one of the good reasons, that how people will actually stick to the content and learn what to do.
And there are some additional aspects as well. So I believe there are different types of people, right? Some of the learners can learn really well on their own, so they can go and find the material and teach themselves the practices. Some of the learners need motivation, external motivation.
True.
And the problem sometimes with those generic projects, and even good ones, right? The ones that are implementing some real life example. So for data engineering, maybe one of the most regular examples would be connecting to Twitter's data stream in real time and then processing something and then getting some insights. There are so many examples out there that you can just copy paste and present it as yours.
Yeah.
And that's even today even a bigger problem, because you can also try and generate it completely with LLMs or enrich it with LLMs. So you don't learn much while doing that. And if you're kind of creating your own project, your own idea, even if you code it with LLMs, part of it with LLMs, the practices will stick a lot more, because it's not just copy pasting the code that works. It's building something from multiple pieces and stitching it up together.
Yeah, I guess so. Like, it kind of falls, to one of the questions that I wanted to ask. So what are your thoughts about vibe coding?
It really depends on how you define that. Vibe coding itself, right? We can kind of quote what the famous Andrej Karpathy kind of tweet said, right? I don't. Okay, so it will take some time to find it, but so I will not quote it. But it's basically typing not random, but typing instructions into your terminal, into your chat box, or I guess cursor's chat box, right? And then never touching the code yourself, and you just type something. It kind of usually works. If it doesn't, you type something else, and it starts to work most of the times.
Like 8 out of 10, it gives you something runnable.
And I have the same experience. Usually the code is so overcomplicated that comes out of it. Like the implementation of simple things, we are so abstracted away in classes and objects and weird naming. Not weird naming.
Naming is kind of
okay, but it's overcomplicated to solve a simple problem. So what I wanted to say is that there are multiple definitions of it, and some developers call assisted coding vibe coding as well. And
true.
I totally believe in those scenarios where you kind of build your code base in terms of vibe coding, but for very small pieces of code. So, for example, 10 lines, you can vibe code easily, right? Write me a function that does that and that.
Yeah.
And then you instruct the model to look for specific software architecture or architectural mistakes in your code, explain them, and then fix them. That works. But you need to know software architecture. You need to know why these classes are coded in this way, why functional programming is better for these cases, why you need to do singletons in this place and not other places. And if you instruct your LLM to do all of that in details, then I believe in this kind of vibe coding. I even believe in vibe coding when you ask Lovable to build a website, and you copy paste the website, let's say, into the code into Cursor, and then you kind of build on top of it as a scaffold in a sense.
True.
And then you kind of make it production ready because it's not, right? It's never production ready. So I believe in that. When it comes to just prompting Lovable and then deploying it, or V0 by Vercel or similar, it will eventually work, right? We need to kind of live in this mindset that it will eventually work, but it will take maybe 5 years for it to work, but it will work. It doesn't work today, and we need to build our code bases with assumption that it doesn't work. These are my thoughts. But also, if you're building in that space and you're building against vibe coding, I think you will fail, because you need to improve the outputs of vibe coding. And if you're not building in there, your startup will kind of, I think, fade out eventually. You need to embrace it eventually.
You need to be somewhere in the middle, I guess.
Now, long term, maybe move more towards that.
Yeah, also, I think, one of the reasons, one of the fears I have actually when people are starting to use, let's say, vibe coding, for the Hoopla project, right? That looking at how, in general, how LLMs or so-called AI, how it checks for the biggest probability that it will, this answer is that the biggest probability that this is correct, right? So it will end up, that the most mediocre code will actually usually be the generic answer. And if you don't know, like you mentioned about the systems and the architecture, if you don't give that context to the LLM, it won't know, to go deeper to the, say, more on the right side, or right tail, right, of the code, where it actually is better. So most of the code will be at best mediocre as well.
I haven't tested, to be honest, it's extensively, but I've heard good things about agentic mode of Cursor, where it iterates, let's say, 50 times against the code that it has written itself, so it reflects on it and improves it. So I would imagine it would still be mediocre because it's trained on mediocre, not on all of the code.
Majority.
The majority is mediocre, right? So that's true. I agree with you here. But there was one more statement that I wanted to maybe argue on, but I forgot.
So let's call it. We can if it comes to your mind, we can catch up on it later, or otherwise. So like I also noticed that when you mentioned that you started writing your content, creating a lot of it, like how much time does it take actually you to create so many actually like graphs, designs, all of these things. Like I try to keep up, like doing at least proper content piece a week, and it took me actually like I don't know, like 4 to 6 hours in some cases if the topic is like complicated, have to go there. So how long does it take you now and before?
Okay, so maybe I'll start from the very beginning because I'm also mixing up the content. I'm reposting a lot. That can be seen clearly, I think, because yes, it takes a lot of time. When I started off, which was 3 years ago now, I think. Yes, it should be around 3 years ago now. I was talking mostly about data engineering and some machine learning engineering. Mostly, I think it was about, when it comes to data engineering, it was Kafka, Spark, and similar. So when it actually took off, when I noticed that it really works, those more complicated graphs, because I've also started with simpler concepts and simpler images. So those took me around 4 to 6 hours, as you mentioned. So I would do that daily. So I would do that kind of, usually it was 8 p.m. to sometimes 1 a.m. or something for the first half a year or something. Most of them was daily. I had some skip days, but it took a lot of time and a lot of effort. But I think that's why it actually was successful, because I don't have credentials of, let's say, other big creators like Zach Wilson, who is Guru, ex Meta, ex Spotify, right? Spotify.
No, Netflix. Airbnb, yeah.
Anyway, so for creators who have that, it's usually like 10 times easier because we don't even need to produce visual content. Now it's harder because LinkedIn has changed, but back then it wasn't. So I think that was what actually allowed me to kind of build up the audience, and I was also at the right place in the right time. Back then, the only curator who was actually doing those graphs, explaining some flows in your system, was Alex Hu, right? So I kind of, I remember then, I really loved everything that he was doing. So I thought, why not try and create something like he does, but for data specifically, right? And I did. And it was success day one. And I continued, I guess, for 3 years now. And I had 1 year break, by the way, because when I was chief product officer at Neptune AI, I had clearly bigger responsibilities to take care of. And I was mostly reposting stuff. I think it was even half a year where I didn't post anything. And now when I look back at it, of course, I got a ton of good things from Neptune, ton. But if I would have kind of continued back then, because these were the golden years almost, I think, for content creation, where I did nothing. So it was now it's a little bit of a shame, but I'm trying to continue and see where it goes.
But it makes sense, right? If you would keep up with that pace, I guess you would burn out, right? With
I was close to burnout. Maybe it was already a burnout when it was end of 2023, I think. So I was in my journey of my newsletter for half a year or something. And at one point in time, I even started monetizing it. So I had my content behind paywall. And then, of course, I had expectations from myself that I would post weekly, sometimes even twice per week. And I tried to do that. But then CPO role came in, and LinkedIn posts, etc. So what I did is I canceled paid subscription. I returned the money for the people that have actually already paid, and stopped producing content for some time, but then returned with the free content. I think it was 6 months ago now or something.
Yeah. Like actually, that's one of the questions I wanted to ask. Because when I saw myself actually and like was following your in a way footsteps, because like you were a good example what to follow, like in the success, and the followers wise, I was like thinking, like, yeah, I need to try to do something similar, but with a different angle. So I wouldn't be looking, like copycat or whatnot, because that's always easy to do. And then like, okay, so if I want to do content, I have to like, it has to be properly created. You cannot half-ass it. You have to also do a proper research. You have to prep things in advance. Like if I would have put things, under paywall, like I would say that my expectations for my content would also, skyrocket, and then like either I would get, complete block on writing something, or like I would have to settle for something that I wouldn't consider even, like putting out at some point, because like you're just like putting something out, just because you have to put it, because you put that on yourself.
But when you actually listen to our creators, for example, Pragmatic Engineer, how he described his journey, he actually added paywall so that he could focus on quality content for the reader. Because if you're actually doing ads on your newsletter episodes, then you're kind of pushed to produce as much content as possible. Because if you have each newsletter sponsored, and for the upcoming 4 months, right? Why not add additional one in the middle?
Sure.
So I don't know. I actually had a few sponsored newsletters as well, but I don't know if it doesn't feel right, to be honest, to some extent. And I'm planning to maybe continue without that and find other ways to monetize the content. So I wouldn't say that, what I want to say is that I would not say that putting a paywall on your reader is a bad thing, because it kind of pushes you to produce quality content. But then if you get paid enough, you can actually quit your main job and you can focus on it full time, which is what most of the creators strive for.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, true.
But you need to start somewhere, because you can't just quit your job and expect to earn
money won't start raining, down on you. Yeah. So that makes sense. But I guess what you mentioned, like you actually put out a lot of effort, and consistency actually led you to where you are now with like how many tens of thousands or like hundreds of thousands now you have followers?
In where?
LinkedIn.
LinkedIn is 145,000.
You're like, I guess I would have to guess you're somewhere in top 3 of Lithuanians.
Yeah,
or like top 1.
When it comes to AI, top 1. When it comes to globally Lithuania, that's I think actually number 3. So Linas Kojala I think is number 1.
Okay.
And then other Linas is number 2.
The one who gives out
Belunas, right?
Yeah.
I think those are top 2, and maybe Linas Belunas is top 1. Linas Kojala is top 2, and I am top 3.
Yeah, okay, but that actually makes sense. Their topics are like wider. Kojala is, on like politics, on geopolitics, and
he's great. He's a good guy.
That's insanely good content from him.
Yes.
Okay, so let's diverge back, from a bit content. Like not back from the content, but actually to, I guess, like what I wanted to ask. How you choose, to what part you're focusing technically, because you mentioned you're hands-on, right? You're still doing some work, helping companies, set up some things, or like how do you keep up, what to actually implement, what's a fade or like a hype actually? How does that go through your head?
To be honest, like when you work with companies, everything is a lot more simple than everyone else is talking about, right? Yes, because you have a business problem and you need to solve it. You can't go ballistic on top technologies when you know that they will not add additional value, even though they cost, even if they cost 10 times more. It's not what your client wants. Your client wants proper metrics defined.
Yes.
That we want to improve, and then we want the solution that does that. It doesn't even need to be LLMs all over the place. If LLM is needed, then we use it. If not, then not. Lots of the code of agentic systems is not LLM based. It's a lot of data engineering. For example, how do you extract the data that you need for maybe some outputs of an LLM, right? That you can actually connect to that output. But how do you then connect multiple data sources that you provide the most proper context to the LLM to make a choice? So there's a lot of data engineering or regular kind of Python engineering, or not Python necessarily. And then somewhere in between, you have one LLM call that does the job. It's 10% of everything, because you need to set up all of your observability foundations so that you know that you're improving the metrics that you're aiming for. You need to implement proper testing, proper CI/CD pipelines. It's more of a software engineering, which is non-deterministic in some cases, but definitely not lovable and similar type of.
I guess, like hard work is actually getting the foundations right.
Foundations right, of course. Now there is this big emerging topic of standardized protocols of communication, right? So MCP, A2A, and similar things. So these ones are really just now emerging, and they might need to replace some of the work that we are currently doing, because if everyone is switching to that, then it means that there's something behind it. And I know what there is behind it, but it adds complexity to the system initially, as all things do, right? But then make it easier long term.
Okay. So talking about the MCPs, right? I saw a lot of things, like everyone is trying to show how you can integrate them. I saw most recently, I think was Baxter, they showed, that they did something internally. There's DBT, doing these things, So for the readers, who are might not be familiar, can you explain them as for a 5-year-old, if possible?
Okay, 4 or 5 years old. So first you need to understand what AI agents are. Right? Or agentic systems, doesn't matter. So they use tools which are just Python functions usually, and how they are used is that you simply provide LLM a list of available tools, and you ask them if they want to use any, and if they want, then please also provide arguments to put into those functions, and then you just parse them out and you run those functions. Most of the LLM frameworks have this abstracted out, so that you don't need to implement all of it underneath. And what MCP is trying to do is normalize how these tools are implemented and shared between domains, data domains, I would say. The current problem that it tries to solve, and it is a problem, is that everyone is using different LLM orchestration frameworks. Some might even not use LLM orchestration frameworks. And each connection to a different database or different data source is also implemented differently, because a different function can be written for your internal, connected to how you build your internal software, right? So now that creates a potential n times n, where n is the time of different function implementations, and m is the amount of databases and data sources, integrations, number of integrations, different integrations, right? So every one of them needs to be written, maintained, and made sure that it works. Now, MCP tries to remove the implementation of these functions away from the creator of agentic systems, and it allows those tools to be implemented in MCP server and exposed them to LLMs to be used, right? And that kind of removes this N to M and makes it 1 to M relationship. Also, it unlocks additional qualities, like now each of the owner of a data domain can build their own tools and describe themselves how those data sources should be used by LLMs, because the data domain experts know best how their data should be used. So tools is one abstraction that we expose. Another one is resources, and then tools, resources, and prompts, right? So basically, it allows to stitch up completely out of those blocks what needs to be passed to LLM to make sure that that context in that data domain is used most efficiently. So you have tools, you have suggested prompts that you can just pull and use in your LLMs, and you have resources which are data assets which are not controlled by LLMs. So they also tried to kind of segregate the responsibility of who should be using which primitive. So tools are for LLMs that need to choose what to do.
Yep.
Resources are for humans or programmers that know what needs to be done, but we can extract the data directly. And prompts are how do you add that context into a prompt so that it's best fit to answer specific questions about that data domain. There are more advanced primitives that allow you to, for example, that allows server to client communication, so that you can also, a server can also work on data which is locally present on the application, kind of container that application is running. Maybe not 4 to 5 years old, but basically it simplifies
it simplifies
decouples implementation. So it's like bringing microservices to how tools are defined and shared.
Okay.
But it has its own rough edges. There have been a lot of articles written about security issues on how you can inject malicious code into MCP servers. How they lack authentication. They don't lack authentication, but it's hard to implement authentication in MCP. Possible, not easy to do. A2A or other, by the way, protocols, because now I kind of, after A2A, I also got introduced to this agency project, which tries to define all of the all of the communication between agents, like remote and local agents. Not only how the communication should be done, but also how observability should be done there, etc., etc. And they are trying to solve a different problem, which is cross-agent communication. Because when you think about an agent, there are multiple ways of defining it, but if you're an agent builder, you can build your own agent, let's say in LangGraph, and it's a local application.
Yeah.
You can have sub-agents, but we are running in the same process, kind of. So it's kind of the same agent with multiple sub-agents in between. But then, if you deploy multiple agents and you want those agents to communicate between each other, one can be implemented in Crew AI, one can be implemented in LangChain, another in LangGraph. There's a problem of communication between them because it has never been properly defined how it should even work. And this is maybe the simplest problem of how the communication kind of not way of communicating, but what kind of messages should be sent back and forth. But another question is, how do you communicate cross-agent state, right?
Yeah.
For example, I had this example recently, very popular systems, deep research agents, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's very good example to explain why A2A matters. You can implement the entire deep research agent in a single process with LangGraph, and there are many examples of that. But you might want to build something more complex. So you have, for example, a reasoning model that creates the outline of the report, and then you want to delegate each of the paragraphs to an agent. But those agents don't need to be local. They can be remote because each of agent can be better fit to research specific paragraph. And now, how do you make sure? And you want to run all of them in parallel because you might have 30 paragraphs, right? You want the report to be created quickly. Now, how do you control that as the reflection loops are running in those agents in parallel, they are aware of the entire current state of the report because we don't want to repeat the same insights that other agents might have brought to later chapters already. So how do you make sure that every agent knows the current state of the report while you have 30, let's say, reflection loops running in each of them, continuously updating the central report, right? There are no standardized ways of how to do that. And this is what one of the things A2A and other protocols are trying to solve. So one of the things, another thing is, of course, discovery of agents. So what A2A, for example, proposes is that if you have your website, your domain, you simply expose agent.json file under a specific path, and then they can index all of the agents in the world because they don't control, but we already have all of the web indexed. And they would have a directory of all available agents in the web.
Okay.
So one of the things, but it doesn't mean that A2A necessarily will be the final standard to define how it works.
I would say, like AI and LLMs, the standard, they are going through the standard, like a hyper, like the, how to say, if it was, I think, Gartner curve or whatnot, so called, like hyper focused or whatnot, or like just basically the boom at the top, and now it's going a bit down, where it's starting to actually figure out where it's actually going. So I guess it's going to be standardized, not now, but like in a couple of years, I guess.
Yeah, we haven't. That's interesting. It has already been 2 years or even more, a bit more, right? 2 years when the first kind of ChatGPT moment happened, and only now we are kind of seeing the first standards emerging. And of course, most of the top players are involved, like LangChain, LangChain and Crew AI and Haystack and other orchestration frameworks want to be involved. So you can see the big list of companies.
I would say it's quite similar to what happened in the data space, like somewhere around COVID times, a bit further, where there were like tons of companies, just creating, to solve a specific problem. And like after it has passed, I think even last year, started a simulation, or like, one company buying another just because, it's a bit similar, or, like the customer base is good for them. So basically it started to like slim down and go to the direction where it's actually going. I think it's going to happen, like in a couple of years, it's going to happen.
Yeah, it might happen. But what I meant specifically is that those protocols, open standards, they are defined not by a single company, even though Google is behind it.
Yeah.
So that's why it might and might not succeed. Question mark, right?
True.
Will the industry agree that such a big player can be? Is it truly open, right?
Yes.
And then all of these other protocols that are emerging have also large lists of companies backing them up, including the same ones like Langsmith, etc., etc.
Yeah, so like similar things, right, with the open table formats, right?
Yes.
It was like companies backing them up, and then suddenly, like, oh, here's a one, that can handle all of them, then, Databricks are like, okay, we're acquiring, Iceberg, basically, and then like, yo, we're doing this and that. Like, I assume, it doesn't matter which protocol or what technology, in the end, like it will be the community who's actually driving in the end, or what's like the most agreed upon standard, I guess.
It should be truly open, driven by community. But it's so early, we don't know
Exactly
if Google will allow that, right?
True.
Because even this exposing agents.json under a specific path, it's very, very useful for Google, and we know why.
Of course.
But should it be how it actually should be indexed, right? And I don't think that they would agree on something else because,
of course, they have their own narrative.
Exactly.
Talking about like you mentioned a lot of standards, protocols, and tooling. So how do you keep up? I when you mention at work, is that actually you have a fixed problem, right? You don't have like that much of, let's so-called trial and error in a way. Because they have limited budgets as well, and they have performance related criteria and so on. How do you actually keep up with those, or like how does it pop up under your radar?
So all of the companies and tools that exist, so I researched them continuously, but I don't necessarily do that because I'm planning to pick something new. I do that because I don't need to, but I like to cover those things. And in general, I am now kind of also a product person. So that's what product people do. We research the market and they think about how it will evolve. But when building actual products, I start with the simplest possible tooling and the most established one. So as an example, Langsmith is a very good observability platform. And there's also LangFuse, which is maybe even better, but since Langsmith is easier to get to, kind of, because there are more examples and not only examples, but I tried it more myself. I kind of go with it initially, but I haven't pivoted yet to anything else. And when it comes to frameworks, I start off without frameworks, with only adding some additional I would call them semi-orchestrating abstractions. Okay. So I was recently introduced to this very nice tool called Instructor. And the only thing that it does is that it normalizes the API for different models so that you can very easily switch them after you need to do a change. They make sure that structured outputs are of a form that you need, because we do some restarts if something fails, and they allow you to, in all types of large language models that we support, they allow you to pass output schema in Pydantic model, and it compiles it to that Pydantic object as an output. And then you can do chains yourself. You don't need to use Langsmith if you don't want to, because Langsmith and LangGraph abstracts very core kind of knobs in your system very deep, and it's really hard to tune very specific low-level things that are sometimes needed. More often they are not, but if you do need that, then long term you're screwed.
Right? Like that's how usually it goes, right? You actually at some point you have to turn those screws later.
Depends on the complexity of a project, I think, but if it is at least kind of a little bit more than just a regular chatbot, then yes. And one more thing here. Yeah, LangGraph. LangGraph is good. It's great, but it's, in my opinion, is still meant for more complex systems that are being built, like bigger agentic systems with more reliability of tools and allowing LLMs to choose the tools we want to use. Very often, the topologies are just defined by human, and you don't need to allow an LLM to choose what tool to use.
Okay, makes sense. Talking about, the tooling and whatnot. So I have a question. Have you actually built something like for your own use case, to simplify your life? Let's say, either for collecting, like you mentioned, you're keeping up with the space, in general of the competition and whatnot. Or have you tried maybe, or you have ideas how to actually make that part easier, using this agentic systems or whatnot?
I haven't built anything specific yet. That would be to solve my own day-to-day problems that much. I have used code-written AI tools that I wrote myself to do some analysis, some filtering on some data that is not obvious to me how to filter. A lot of it is related to, let's say, my also LinkedIn data that I have. Which is a lot of data sometimes, and patterns I can't always figure out myself. I have built many like these, you would call them toy projects, right? But they are not that useful in my day-to-day, but I was thinking of projects that I haven't yet had a chance to do, like scraping my own newsletters and articles and allowing search on top of it, or even creating a collective of creators who would like to join and kind of create a chatbot only on top of their work. And if the answer can't be answered with that work specifically, then you point to some different sources, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which would be kind of cool. Not hard to implement, but
I guess you would need your permission to actually use that.
Exactly.
That would be the hardest part.
That's why you need to sign up.
Yeah. Okay.
If you want to be included, but of course, there should be incentive to be included, right?
Yeah.
If the bot would become popular.
True, and as well, how to manage, let's say fairness. I do assume, that you can add some weights, like if there are, to prefer one article, let's say, to another, how to make it fair, and the other parts. But I guess that's, a bit out of the question, like in the current scenario.
Yeah, but in general, I wanted to build something with content, and maybe there are many already companies and tools doing that, but figuring out the signal from the content that you like to read, and instead of reading all of it, just get the main highlights and then click into them if you want to read more. But there are solutions. I know at least 4, I think, that do that.
I'm lazy. I usually, if there is a lot, I try to also, sometimes it's not ethical in some cases, but for even my content, if I actually written something, I paste it to the GPT. In my case, I'm using Claude. Okay, summarize this, what are the main points? Then I'm checking over, if it actually makes sense, if I cover the things, and if someone would actually do that, does that make sense, and does it, conform to what I actually intended to do? So I guess that's one of the, the most easiest and the most approachable for everyone that they're used to. Copy paste.
Or figuring out proper English grammar as a non-native English speaker.
Oh my God. And then, it does add, those specific keywords, delve, empowering, and I'm sounding like a robot. No,
but you can prompt it to.
You can add.
Don't change anything, just fix grammar.
Yeah, true. I use Grammarly for that, so on that end, it's quite helpful.
Interesting.
Okay, so talking about content, we talked about content. I'm gonna ask you a question about your keynote that you're gonna deliver on Friday, right? So, how did you come up with the idea of your topic?
The idea of a topic.
Yes.
So no, since I am so I'm speaking with a lot of people in the industry. They just a side effect of having a big reach. I'm also constantly thinking about cutting edge in AI and observing all of the hype cycles that are happening in the industry. And I think there are already 5 this year. You can actually label the months by the hype cycle that happened in that month. One of them was vibe coding. Then we have MCP, we have A2A, we had DeepSeek moment. And I think OpenAI something as well.
Yeah.
Anyway, so much of this information is hype, but much of it is very useful. And I wanted to kind of synthesize everything in what is useful, why it is useful, and how it will impact the future of AI that we are building. And I think it is needed because without explaining why and where specific things fit in, then it just becomes just noise.
Yeah.
And some of it is just noise.
True.
Unfortunately. And I think it will be a very good wrap up of the entire day because all of those topics, I believe to some extent, not all of them. I don't think anyone will be talking about A2A and someone will be talking about MCP, but A2A is another story. But another new upcoming kind of, I would call it not a battle, but a war is also happening. And it started this Monday, actually. So I'm also planning to include the most recent things that are happening.
Okay.
So there is this old-going battle, but now the creator of Lang, Smith, criticized openly suggestions by OpenAI on how the agentic systems should be built, and he even called them misguided, right? So there's a big battle between agentic systems built via code, right? Small agents, small LLMs automating stuff, and big, huge models as an agent, right?
Yeah.
And I think this also needs to be covered, and I think both sides have their own future. One is more targeted towards AGI, while another is targeted more towards business value. And I think it's really interesting also to think on how this AGI path can work. I don't think that it's all kind of smoke and mirrors. There is some stuff behind it.
Yeah.
So I'll be covering multiple kind of areas of current agentic system landscape. They will not be those in the sky things, right? They will be grounded down to real world. So I will not be talking much about unrealistic things. Yeah, you'll see.
Okay. No spoilers, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and since we're coming, to the end, like I tend to, I ask, people of their advice, for people, like coming to the data space and let's say in this case, AI, MLOps, So what would be the advice you would give, to the listeners who are thinking of moving or like, focusing more on the AI MLOps? I do assume, that this is not an entry level actually position because you have to have some kind of a background like engineering or like, something related to data before you can get to the AI MLOps things. So what would be your guidance, let's say, or advice?
So I think that MLOps is a little bit harder to get in than AI engineering, and LLMOps is as well, but I also consider LLMOps as part of AI engineering in the nowadays world. Tips. So I think everyone will eventually have some AI engineering work to be done in their day-to-day. However, as we move more into no-code solutions and drag-and-drop type of agent creation, I think those practitioners who are not that technical will also have power in their hands to build some automations. If you are striving to be technical, then AI engineering is the role for you. And I believe it is the role of the future in general, because software engineers will be AI engineers and data engineers will be AI engineers and data scientists will be eventually AI engineers. What could be the tips for more easier kind of, I wouldn't even call it transition, but having one foot in there? Just you will need to build, right?
Yes.
There's no other way.
Yep.
You will need to build and not just response get. I don't remember how the response is retrieved by the OpenAI client, but do something more advanced. Do something with inputs and outputs that you provide to the LLM. Try to connect few together to solve some more complex business problem. I believe there are so many in your day-to-day life, in your not day-to-day life, but in your day-to-day job, that you can automate.
Cool. So thank you for your insights, for sharing, your experience and your insights, in general about the AI and what's currently happening. I'm excited for your keynote on Friday. And thank you for agreeing to talk to me. It was a pleasure to catch up with you.
Same here. And thank you for the opportunity.